The thing about accidentally saving a princess is that nobody tells you there's paperwork. I want to be clear about what actually happened, because the version that got back to Earth was, according to my sister, the coolest thing anyone in our family has ever done, and according to my flight insurer, a catastrophic misuse of a Class C hauler that voids your collision coverage. Both of those are true. Neither of them is complete. Here's the complete version. I was running a standard cargo haul terraforming equipment for a colony on the far edge of the Velcara transit corridor when my proximity alert went off like someone had set it on fire. A debris field, fresh and hot and spinning right across the corridor, and in the middle of it, tumbling end over end, a Velcara escape pod. Velcara escape pods are beautiful things. All smooth carapace and bioluminescent panels, built the way you build something when you've had 600 years of spaceflight to figure out what works. This one was about to become a very elegant collection of fragments. I didn't think about it. That's the part I can't really explain. And believe me, I've tried. Because people keep asking. I didn't run a calculation. I didn't weigh the diplomatic implications of a human pilot interfering with Velcara Royal Transit space. I just shoved my throttle to maximum, got my hull between the pod and the largest incoming chunk of debris, and held on while my ship made a sound like a metal recycling center falling down a staircase. The debris hit. The pod didn't die. Neither did I, technically. Though my left engine housing had opinions about the experience. By the time I got my ship stopped and the ringing out of my ears, I had 3 Velcara military vessels holding position around me. Their hull markings were in a pattern I didn't recognize from the standard registry. I found out later that pattern meant royal escort. At the time, I just thought it meant I was in trouble. They boarded me 14 minutes after I stopped moving. 6 soldiers came through my airlock, all of them taller than me by half a head. Their carapaces, a deep amber that I later learned indicated active military status. They were armed. They were fast. They moved through my cargo bay with the economy of people who had done this before, and expected to do it again. I had my hands up before they cleared the airlock. This is what you do when 6 armed insectoid aliens board your ship. It is not complicated. The lead soldier, her carapace was darker than the others, with faint iridescent markings at the joints, stopped in front of me and tilted her head in a way that I'd come to recognize as assessment. Her compound eyes didn't blink. They never blink. It's unsettling until it isn't, and then it still kind of is. "You are the pilot," she said. Her translator rendered it in clean, unaccented standard. Not a question. "Yes," I said. "Pilot, and currently very concerned cargo hauler operator. Is the pod okay? Is whoever was in it alive?" she said. "Because of you." "Oh, good." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "I'm Brennan. Liam Brennan. Freelance. I'm licensed for this corridor. I have my certifications here if you need." "We do not need certifications," she said. "Right." I lowered my hand slightly, testing it. Nobody moved. "So am I. Is there something I should be doing right now?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then, without any preamble whatsoever, she bowed. Not a small nod. A full, deliberate bow. Her upper body dropping to a 45-degree angle, held for 3 seconds. Every other soldier in my cargo bay did the same. I stood there with my hands half raised and my mouth slightly open, and absolutely no idea what was happening. "You're not arresting me," I said. She straightened. "No." "Okay." I put my hands down all the way. What are you doing? What is this?" "You are being summoned," she said. "Summoned," I repeated. "By whom?" She tilted her head again. "The one whose life you preserved is the 7th daughter of the Velcara, Queen Ascendant. You are being summoned to the court of the Queen Ascendant herself. I thought about this. Is that better or worse than being arrested? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. They put me on a royal ship within the hour, and my damaged hauler got towed behind us like a very unglamorous moon, and nobody told me anything else until we were already 3 hours into the transit corridor. I spent most of that time trying to figure out if I'd made a terrible mistake or just a regular one. Given that I'm telling you this story, the answer is neither. But I didn't know that yet. The royal ship smelled like a greenhouse, had fought a candle shop, and nobody won. I don't mean that as a complaint. The Velcara are a species that communicates partly through scent, and a royal vessel is essentially a moving olfactory broadcast. Every surface had been treated with compounds that meant specific things to Velcara biology. I had no idea what any of them meant. My nose was just registering it all as expensive. The soldier who'd bowed to me, I'd started thinking of her as the commander, because she was the one who kept appearing when I needed something and disappearing when I didn't, had assigned me quarters in what I can only describe as a very comfortable cage. Nice furniture, no windows, a door that opened from my side but that I suspected could be locked from the outside with a thought. She'd also assigned me an attendant. The attendant's name was something I couldn't reproduce without 3 additional mouth parts. So she'd given me a translation approximation, Saraveth. She was younger than the commander, her carapace the pale gold of someone who hadn't spent much time in hard vacuum. She moved quietly and spoke carefully and watched me with the particular attention of someone who was very curious about a thing they'd been told not to touch. I found out she was the princess about 4 minutes into our first meal together, when I ate before she did. I didn't know eating first was wrong. In my defense, I was hungry. I'd had a traumatic morning involving debris fields and my engine housing, and the food smelled incredible, and nobody had given me a briefing packet titled Velcara Royal Dining Protocol. Don't do this. Saraveth went very still. The 2 attendants standing at the walls went very still. The air in the dining chamber went very still. I put down my utensil. What did I do? The guest does not eat before the host, Saraveth said. Her voice was careful in a way that suggested she was being diplomatic. I'm sorry. I pushed the food away slightly. I didn't know. Do you want me to leave the room and come back in? That is not the protocol. What is the protocol? You have already violated it. Right, but what happens now? She looked at me steadily. Now I eat and we continue, and I speak to the attendants afterward and explain that you are not familiar with our customs. I'm really sorry, I said. I'll learn. What else shouldn't I do? She told me about the direct eye contact with the high attendants. I did that 7 minutes later, completely by accident, because one of them moved and I turned to look and we made eye contact for what I was told afterward was an inappropriately long time. She told me about audible expressions of amusement. I laughed out loud 40 seconds after that because she was describing the 3rd rule I'd broken, and her delivery was so perfectly dry that I genuinely couldn't help it. Saraveth closed her eyes. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry. You're very funny, and I know that's probably not helping. I am not attempting to be funny, she said. That's what makes it funny. She opened her eyes. You are a very strange creature, Liam Brennan. I've been told. I leaned back in my chair. You're the princess. The one I pulled out of the debris field. She was quiet for a moment. Yes, you could have told me. I am telling you now. And the summons the queen. She wants to see me because I saved you. Saraveth set down her own utensil with a precision that suggested this was a subject she'd been waiting to reach. Our law is specific about this. When a life is preserved through the action of another, a bond debt is created. That debt cannot be left unresolved. My mother must evaluate the one who preserved my life and determine the nature of the resolution. I turned this over. So it's like a trial. It is not a trial. What is it? A judgment, she said. Those are the same thing. They are not. I picked up my utensil again. Is the distinction good or bad for me? She looked at me with something that wasn't irritation. I couldn't name what it was yet. The queen does not summon those she intends to dismiss. I chewed on that for a moment, along with what turned out to be a very good protein compound. So that's either really good news, I said, or the fancy way of saying I'm already dead. Something shifted in her expression. Not a smile. Velkhara faces don't do that the way human faces do, but a change in the set of her mandibles, a slight widening of her compound eyes that I filed away as something to understand later. You are not dead, Liam Brennan, she said. Brennan is fine. Everyone calls me Brennan. Brennan, she said. Outside the viewport, the Velkhara homeworld came into view. The city was the size of a continent, and the palace complex at its center caught the light of its star in ways that made my eyes water. And the sheer scale of it hit me somewhere below the rational part of my brain. I was suddenly, comprehensively, not laughing. Seraveth watched me look at it. Second thoughts? She asked. Third and fourth ones, I said. I'm efficient. The throne room was the size of a sports stadium, and I was absolutely certain I was underdressed. I'd been given clothes. Nice ones, as near as I could tell by the standards of Velkhara textile design. They were smooth and dark, and arranged in layers that the attendants had spent 20 minutes getting exactly right. The commander had looked at me when I emerged from the preparation chamber, tilted her head, and said something to Seraveth that my translation earpiece rendered as adequate. Seraveth had said something back that my earpiece rendered as sufficient. I was calling that a win. The throne room was not built for my species. The ceilings were high enough to make me dizzy. The pillars were carved from something that wasn't quite stone. It reflected light wrong, like there were things moving inside it, and the floor was made of interlocking panels that resonated when I walked on them, a low hum that I could feel in my back molars. The Velkhara in attendance were arranged in a perfect half circle, their carapaces representing about 40 different colors, each color meaning something I hadn't had time to learn. The queen was at the far end. I'll say this about the Velkhara Queen Ascendant. She was impossible to look at directly, not because of any physical quality, but because of some combination of her bearing and the throne itself, and the way everyone else in the room oriented toward her like flowers toward a sun. I looked anyway. It seemed important to look. The trouble started before I made it halfway across the floor. A figure stepped forward from the left side of the assembly. His carapace was a deep, near black blue, and he moved with the specific confidence of someone who had been planning this moment. He spoke loudly enough for the room to hear. My earpiece translated, "Honored court, I invoke the reckoning." The room's ambient sound vanished. I mean that literally every murmur, every rustle, every low-frequency hum from the floor stopped. Seraveth, at my left, said very quietly, "Do not move." "What's a reckoning?" I said, also very quietly. A formal challenge to the validity of a bond debt claim. He is asserting that your action does not constitute an act of genuine worth, and therefore my mother has no obligation to honor the summons. Why would he do that? Because if the bond debt is invalidated, my position is weakened, and his faction gains a path to influence succession. I looked at the blue carapaced figure. He was looking back at me with compound eyes that managed to convey something that translated pretty cleanly across species lines. He wanted me gone. "What do I have to do?" I said. "You must answer his challenge in front of the court. He will claim your action was accidental or calculated. You must prove it was neither. What counts as proof?" She paused, and I didn't like the pause. "The court determines that." The challenger's voice rang out again, and my earpiece caught up. "The creature acted from instinct, not honor, an animal response. This cannot constitute a bond debt. Animals are not owed the consideration of the Velkara court." I walked forward. I don't entirely know why I did it before anyone told me to, but it seemed like the right moment. So I walked forward until I was standing in the center of the floor with about 200 compound eyes on me and the silence pressing against my eardrums. "I'll answer that," I said. My earpiece translated outward, and the room processed this, and nobody moved. The challenger looked at me with something that might have been surprise. "The creature speaks?" "The creature does," I said. "I'm Brennan, and he's right that I acted from instinct. I'm not going to argue that. I saw the pod in the debris field. I saw it was going to get hit, and I moved my ship in the way before I'd finished thinking about it." The room waited. "Here's the thing," I said. "In my culture, we have a word for doing something for another living being before you think about whether it benefits you. We call it the right thing. We don't dress it up. We don't make it a ceremony. We just do it because someone was going to die and we had the ability to stop it." I looked at the challenger. He had not moved. "I damaged my ship," I said. "My engine housing is currently in 4 pieces. My insurance is going to have questions I don't have good answers to. I knew that was going to happen when I made the call. I made it anyway." I paused, and I'd make it again. Every time. For her or for anyone else who was in that pod. That's not an animal response. That's a choice. The room stayed silent. "I'm done," I said, to no one in particular. The Queen moved. She had been still since I entered, so still that I'd almost stopped registering her. And then she moved, a single gesture of one forelimb, and the word she said was short enough that my earpiece caught it before the translator could. Something that meant stop, or enough, or both. The challenger closed whatever he'd been about to say and went still. Sereveth exhaled. I heard it even from 10 feet away. The Queen's voice came through my earpiece. "We will speak," she said, "alone." I looked back at Sereveth. She gave me something that wasn't quite a nod, more a deliberate stillness, held for a beat. I turned back toward the throne and walked forward. I was getting very good at walking toward things I didn't understand. Alone with an alien queen who could have me executed with a gesture. Totally fine. I've had worse Tuesdays. This wasn't technically a Tuesday, since I was 5 transit corridors from Earth and local time had ceased to have meaning around day 3, but the sentiment held. The Queen did not take me to the throne room floor. She took me to a chamber behind it, through a passage that the guards opened without being asked. The chamber was smaller than I expected. There was furniture, a low surface that was either a table or a very flat chair, I couldn't tell, and a transparency in the wall that looked out over the city below. I stood near the transparency because it seemed like better positioning than standing in the middle of the room. The Queen settled onto something. She was quiet for long enough that I started wondering if I was supposed to speak first. "There is information," she said, "that you do not have." "I don't have a lot of information," I said. "I'm catching up as fast as I can." The debris field was not an accident. I turned to look at her. Someone engineered it. Yes. Someone tried to kill Sereveth. Yes. I let the shape of that settle. The challenger. His faction. Not him directly, because he is not unintelligent. She paused. Your presence here has complicated their plan. A human who preserved the princess's life becomes a figure in a story they did not want told. They need you to be a small thing. An accident. An animal, as he said. Which is why the reckoning. Which is why the reckoning. She tilted her head. I was learning that this was a gesture of considered attention, not a question. You answered it in a way they did not anticipate. I told the truth, I said. That is not something they modeled. I was about to say something to that when the lights changed. Not in the chamber outside, in the corridor beyond the passage. A shift in frequency. My nervous system registered it before my brain did, because I was moving before I understood why, putting my back against the wall beside the passage opening rather than standing in the middle of the chamber. 3 figures came through the passage fast. They were not guards. Their carapaces were coated in something that made them hard to read in the changed light, and they were carrying implements that I didn't have context for, but that my brain very helpfully categorized as not ceremonial. The queen moved backward with a speed I hadn't expected. One of the figures cut toward her. The other 2 came toward me. This is the part where I should say I did something impressive. The honest answer is that I did something messy and desperate, and it happened to work. The first one came within reach, and I grabbed its upper forelimb. They hadn't expected grabbing. I could tell. Because grabbing is apparently not a standard response in Velkara physical confrontation and used its own momentum to put it into the wall. The impact made a sound I tried not to think about too hard. The second one, I couldn't grab. It caught me across the left side with something that felt like being hit by a door. I went down on one knee, saw the chamber tilt, and then did the thing that has gotten me through most of the bad situations in my life. I didn't stop. I got back up. I got back up because stopping felt worse than the alternative, and because the queen was still in the room, and because I hadn't come this far to end in a corridor I couldn't even find on a map. The second one came again. I moved sideways instead of back, and it overcommitted, and then I had its arm, and it had my ribs, and we went together into the passage entrance. I got the door controls with my elbow, a standard sliding panel. The mechanics weren't that different from cargo bay doors, and got the door closed on its midsection. It stopped moving. I held the door closed with my body, and looked back at the chamber. The queen had managed the third one herself, and I was filing away a significant amount of information about what the Velkara Queen Ascendant was capable of when the moment called for it. The chamber went quiet. I was breathing hard. My ribs had things to say about the door incident. My hands were shaking, which I noticed from a distance. The way you notice things when your body is still in crisis and your brain is 2 steps behind. You are injured, the queen said. I'm fine, I said, automatically. That is not accurate. I'm mobile, I said. Same thing, different context. I looked at her. She was looking at me. The quality of her attention had changed in a way I couldn't fully read. Can someone come get this door? I'm running out of adrenaline. The guards arrived fast alerted, I found out later, by a signal from the queen that went out while I was busy being hit. They took the corridor situation under control. Someone came and looked at my ribs, determined they were bruised rather than broken, and expressed this opinion in a tone that suggested I should count myself fortunate. I counted myself fortunate. I was also going to need to sit down in approximately 90 seconds. The queen waited until the room was clear. Then she said, I have been considering the question of the bond debt. Okay, I said. There is no resolution that fits standard form. I figured it wasn't going to be standard. The debt that exists is not one that can be paid in goods or passage or title. She paused. Only one form of resolution remains that this court has the authority to offer. I leaned against the wall because my knees were suggesting it. What's that? She looked at me with the full weight of something I didn't have a word for yet. I will tell you tomorrow, she said, when you have slept. You want me to sleep on the fact that someone just tried to kill me in your palace? Yes, she said. It is the civilized response. I thought about that. Then I laughed. And it hurt my ribs. And I laughed anyway. "Okay," I said. "Tomorrow." She offered me a seat in the Velkara court. I asked if it came with dental. To be fair, I'd slept on it like she asked. I'd slept 4 hours in the nice cage with the good furniture and no windows, which was 4 hours more than I expected given everything. And I'd woken up to Sareveth outside my door with something that smelled like coffee and wasn't. "How are your ribs?" she asked. "Annoyed," I said. "Everything else?" "The faction's 3 operatives are in custody. The Challenger is denying involvement." She paused. "He will not deny it for long." "You sound confident." "I am." She watched me drink the not coffee. "My mother has decided." "I know. She told me to sleep on it." "Did you?" 4 hours. I set down the cup. "What is she going to offer me?" Sareveth was quiet for a moment. "A formal title. A seat in the court. Permanent residence under Velkara protection. With all the resources that entails." Another pause. "Longer. It is the highest resolution the bond debt law provides. She has never offered it to a non-Velkara." I thought about my cargo hauler, currently being patched by dockyard workers who were probably confused about the damage pattern. I thought about the transit corridor and the colony waiting for its terraforming equipment. I thought about the look on Sareveth's face when I'd laughed in the dining chamber, that shift in her mandibles, the widening of her eyes, and how I'd been filing that away for 3 days now without entirely knowing why. "What happens to the faction if I accept?" I asked. "They lose the narrative that makes them dangerous. A human formally recognized by the court changes the political landscape. The succession threat collapses. And if I don't, they regain it." I stood up. "Then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to refuse the title." Sareveth stared at me. "I can't stay," I said. "I've got a cargo to deliver and a ship to repair and a career that is technically still a career. But I want 3 things instead." She was still staring. "You are refusing." "3 things," I said. "First, safe passage and repair costs for my hauler, signed in writing by the court, so my insurer doesn't come after me. Second, a trade route opened through this corridor for human merchants. Nothing exclusive, nothing complicated, just official access." I paused. "Third, your name." She didn't move for a long moment. "My name?" she said. "The real one. Not the approximation. The one that actually means something." I met her eyes. "The one you use with people who matter." The corridor between us was very quiet. We went before the Queen an hour later. The throne room was full again. The political assembly present for what everyone clearly understood was a resolution moment. The Challenger stood in his position, his posture carrying the particular tension of someone watching a situation they thought they'd controlled. The Queen made the offer formally. The room waited. I stood in the center of the floor, in the same spot where I'd answered the reckoning, and I said, "I'm honored, and I decline." The room's silence changed quality. I laid out the 3 terms: clear, simple, specific. The commander translated each one for the record. The Queen listened without expression. When I finished, the Queen looked at me for a long time. Then she granted all 3. The signing took 2 hours. The trade route documentation was dense enough that I started reading it and then realized I was going to need a lawyer and made a note to get one when I got home. The passage and repair certification was shorter, blessedly. A court official brought it to me with the careful neutrality of someone who had been a court official for a long time and had stopped being surprised by things. The Challenger left the throne room before the signing was complete. Without his narrative, a dangerous human in the court, a queen compromised by foreign influence, his faction had nothing to build on. I watched him go and felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction. Satisfaction would come when I was back in my hauler. Saraveth walked me to the dock. The commander was there, because the commander was always there when something significant was happening. My hauler sat in the bay with fresh patches on the engine housing that I could already tell were better work than the original. The route documentation will take 2 standard weeks to transmit through official channels, Saraveth said. You will receive confirmation. I'll be watching for it, I said. Your people, she said. The merchants. They will be safe in our corridor. I know, I said. You'll make sure. She was quiet for a beat. Then she said something. Not the approximation. The real name, her actual name. The one Velkara use only in the specific register of bond equal to bond equal. The one I'd asked for and that she'd brought to the Queen as one of the 3 terms. She said it once. The sounds didn't entirely fit human hearing, but I caught the shape of them, the rhythm. It was the only time she would ever say it to me. That's what it meant. She would say it once, and I would carry it, and that would be the record of what existed between us. I didn't ask what it meant. I already knew. It meant, I see you. The full, unabbreviated version. It meant everything that had happened in the corridor and the throne room and the dining chamber and the debris field, compressed into something a human mouth couldn't quite say. I nodded. I picked up my duffel. I walked up my hauler's ramp and did my pre-flight checks and got the dockyard clearance and got my ship out of the bay and into the transit corridor, and I pointed my nose toward home with new engine patches and a trade route in my pocket and my ribs still complaining about the door. The corridor opened up ahead of me, long and clean. He knew what it meant. That's why he didn't ask.